ကြပေးသွားပါတယ်ဆက်သွယ်ရေးနဲ့သတင်းအချက်အလက်နည်းပညာဝန်ကြီးဌာနဝန်ကြီးအားအထူးပဲကျေးဇူးတင်ရှိပါတယ်ကျွန်တော်တို့အခမ်းအနားအစီအစဉ်ခေတ္တရန်နာပါမယ်ပြည်ထောင်စုဝန်ကြီးပြန်လည်ထွက်ခွာမှာဖြစ်ပါတယ်ခင်ဗျာHtin Aung Hlaing, please come to the stage.
Well, thank you, everyone. It was very nice to hear the very important notes and remarks from His Excellency. I'll be moderating for this particular part of the session for today. My name is Htin Aung Hlaing. I am Vice President of Engineering from a Silicon Valley company, and then I will also introduce our panelists here on the stage. But before that, we should just set aside some agenda of like what we're going to be talking today, and then how this is going to be going. I think we have about an hour of time, so we will take about 45 minutes for the panel discussion. And probably 15 minutes for question and answer. And then, for the question and answer, I encourage everybody from the audience to ask questions. First, of course, a few ground rules in terms of the questions. We want to make sure, of course, these are questions, not just statements. So the questions towards the panelists so that they can respond and provide their opinions and inputs and the best practices to us all. And also, I see that we have a probably wide varying degree of the English speakers here. So one request to the panelists is to speak louder and also a little bit slower so that everybody in the room can understand. All right, so let me introduce. First, we have Htun from Deloitte, and he is a consulting director for Myanmar and specializing in strategy, operations, and technology and human capital practice. Next to Htun is Alex Long from Google. He is the country lead for policy and government affairs. He specialized in developing and implementing public policy strategy in Asia Pacific region. And next to Alex is Garlick from Facebook. She is the head of public policy for Australia and New Zealand, and she specializes in policy strategy and generating new ideas for Facebook. Next to Mia is John Karr. John Karr is from the Asia Foundation. He is the director of digital media and technology programs. He does a lot of the open data, open government initiatives, including media and social media platforms. Next to John is Diana Nielsen. She is also from Deloitte Consulting, Myanmar. And also she is working on a JD in law from Columbia University of Law. And I would like to introduce from our MCIT department, Ministry of MCIT. We have everybody here on the panelists, so let's get started. First, just want to warm up a little bit. This is a little bit of I'm on stage and a little bit formal, but I would like to be a bit more interactive with panelists. First, to just warm up, why the title is about the best practices in social media and what Myanmar can learn from the world. So, first, why do we think best practices? We need to have best practices. Why is it important? Why should we just why can't we just let it to the common sense? I would like to actually ask Chris and see what he thinks about the why do we need to have best practices.
Sure. Yeah. Before that, I just probably also have you to help because our last minute, Mr. Aung, he's a regulator from the Myanmar's Telecommunication and Information Technology Regulatory Department. So he agreed to join us. So thank you very much, Thank
you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So, I think there are like two forces. I think when social media and what we evolve in the world. I think there's no longer, I think the first thing I think is that there's no longer local or global, or it's no longer, I think we become pretty much a one country, right? So I think it's what we've seen in those issues, some places elsewhere in the other place already happened. And so we kind of have to walk from one another. So I think instead of reinventing the wheel, I think we need to reach out and work as a global issue, no longer in silo, and no longer, I think it's important for us to collaborate and work with the international community, learning best practices. And it's not just in technical manner, but also in the policy practice, how other governments interact and this kind of policy. And there's no right or wrong in some cases. I mean, they might make some mistake in here and there, but we are learning process, and we have to adapt and try to adapt the best what we can, given the circumstance that we know what the best. So the other four, I think, is the best practice alone. I think doesn't come up from people maybe like us. Actually, best practice coming from the community, right? Community as a whole, like everybody. So we try to look for the solution. It has to be inclusive. Not the solution work for me, not for the government, not for the one entity, not for the one company, but as a community as a whole. So I think this is the best practice that has to become from community through the consensus, and then building up the consensus, and people are willing to do with the good intention for the community. So I think it's the best practices. Opportunity like this, learning from international, is not only just important. I think it should be the foundation for democratic society as large. I think we should engage more with international community and including the local community, and then collaborating with government and non-government. I think that should be the way for the solution. I think so. That's my perspective for the best practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. John, if you can say something about what should this audience get from this panel? What do you think that they should, as a take away from the best practices at the?
Okay. Well, thanks again for having me. It's great to be here. I am with the Asia Foundation, and we do have an office here in Yangon, so we're very excited to be here in Myanmar, working with all of you to try to solve some of the challenges that Myanmar faces as it opens and develops. I guess my perspective on best practices is that there are standards and there are approaches that are universal. I always think when I see hate speech online, what is it that what do I do? Who do I call? What kinds of steps can I take to address this thing that I'm seeing online, which I understand. I know it's bad because I know bad things when I see them. So there are legal standards that I think we can rely on. There are standards that are global. There are best practices in that regard. I think there are also standards with respect to how we interact with the platform, like Facebook and Google. They all have what we would call terms of service and standards themselves. And communicating with them directly when we see something that we don't like is important. And that's also, I think, a standard that's global. And that's a best practice. But I think when you talk about Myanmar specifically, it has to be, as Chris mentioned, something that includes a local solution, a community-driven and community-led solution. Because I think, when you talk about legal solutions and you talk about technical solutions, they're not always as responsive as we'd like them to be. They don't move quickly. They don't address unique challenges that are unique to this country. So it's important to have this kind of process that's locally driven, that gives local people a voice and gives them an opportunity to answer that question, what do I do when I see something wrong on the internet? And again, that's not just a technical solution. It's not just a legal solution. I think it's a solution that you all must sort of develop collaboratively, and that's across civil society, that's government, that's the media, that's academia. But I also think it's important not to forget that religious leaders are important in this dialogue, because religious leaders across the country have very strong networks at the local community level that we can work with these individuals to share messages and to share information and to engage communities in a conversation about what to do when you see something on social media that you don't think is right and is in fact something that we would call hate speech. So again, I think there are standards and best practices that are global, but there are also solutions that are unique to the country context, and that's something that needs to be developed here in Myanmar. So that's my take.
Thank you, John. Thanks. So, the thing now that we are touching on the social media and community topic, one thing that I want to go back to that a little bit. As social media users, we are quite familiar with these communities, even on the social media, like pages, groups, subscribers, followers on Facebook, YouTube, different social media outlets. There are great examples of like these community formings on the social media. For example, like communities formings during the attacking the natural disasters. Why is the sense of community critical in social media? And if it is critical in the social media, well, what can we do more from your perspective?
I think community is not just important. I think the most important. I think the reason is that I think basically I've seen the role and responsibility of the community. I think became more even bigger. Right, I used to think about it. I mean, you're a technical person throughout the internet evolution. I mean, when they invented the email, probably consumers started using it in 93s and 91, 92, 93, those days. I think that's a one-to-one communication, right? So mainly it's dominant for. And then you have in around 97 to onwards in the web revolution, the blogs, and then there's coming in, and then I think that's becoming one-to-many approach, which is somebody put out the blogs to communicate with a big group of people. In 2004 and beyond, the social media that has become a many-to-many communication. So basically, people, there's no longer the clear line: is it personal or the private? So it's a community as a whole. What you say, what you do, basically impact to the community. So and Myanmar users we actually have opened up to the internet in around 2004. So you will see that people jump to the leapfrog, or what you call it. Everybody's have a fast application, like become the social media tools that become the very fast application. And nobody, without even knowing anything, that they are naturally built in mobile phones and all. So I think it's the empowerment is right there. But people basically, as the community, I think is application, and I think that basically in other evolution, other part of the country, when they have very much engaged throughout the stage of user pattern. But then we have a very different patterns. People without knowing. Some people, they don't know if I post something, even other people will have an impact. They don't have the kind of user behavior they've been imposed to. So I think community as a whole, we need to come back, look, these are the impacts to our community, but not virtual world is no longer a virtual world. It has actually impact also to our physical world that we live in. So as this is a powerful tool, but we have to be accountable too. And I think to me, it's very simple. If I go and talk to Myanmar government and they impose something, even they do it right, I don't think people will accept it, because that's the nature of it. I think this is not only just Myanmar government, but any governments that we work around the world. And same thing with one company try to provide the products that will solve the solution for the safe surfing of the Facebook or users of the Google. I don't think that is, because no one company can do that either. but only through the community, with collectively, and the influence of the policy and adapting the technology properly and educating the people, then only we can have a solution. So I think this is not just one of the best solution, but only the solution. So my proponents, I think, is the community as a solution should be our direction moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. You actually touched base a little bit on the role of government in social media. Definitely, Myanmar government is definitely taking initiative. This forum is one example, the way the government is letting the community lead the effort in how to deal with the social media. But from John, from your perspective, what best practices should government consider for better governance in social media world, especially in the in Myanmar context?
Well, that's a very good question. Government can provide leadership in certain areas, but again, I think as a convener of a discussion that includes journalists, researchers, civil society organizations, religious leaders, community leaders, providing that kind of leadership is important to bringing together all of the various actors that I think can create that community that needs to be existent in Myanmar, that's focused on this challenge, that is working across sectors to have a constructive dialogue on what to do with respect to hate speech online. Just a couple of examples. Again, I mentioned the idea that religious leaders are wonderful partners in this effort because of their connections to the local communities across the country. But I think also journalists and the media have a role to play, and that role is to serve as an unbiased source of information so that people who are online can turn to alternative viewpoints that aren't just rumor and hearsay online. The media has a real role to play. And then also I think we need to do better research in this area in Myanmar, because I think there are questions about the roots of hate speech online on platforms like Facebook. For example, are the voices that we often see contributing to this kind of negative atmosphere online, are they local people? Are they Myanmar people? Or are they from other parts of the world? That's a big question, I think, that we need to answer. Another question that's, again, I think there needs to be more research in this area is, are these activities that are taking place online in Myanmar organized in some way? Because I think there's evidence that suggests there is more orchestration going on than it is a true reflection of the views of the Myanmar people. I think we see lots of similar posts online. That's what I understand to be the case, and they appear to be at times coordinated. So I think there may be opportunities here for research. And again, I guess the role of government is to provide that kind of open space for this to happen, and to encourage it, and to be a convener, and to be an honest broker in this effort. Because I think we have to encourage everyone to participate. All of the various sectors that I mentioned need to play a role. And I think government and the international community can contribute to this process of convening and bringing people together so that we can understand what the problem is and what to do about it. Because again, I think we have to solve this problem. And the problem is people in the countryside probably see these posts, and most people want to do something about it. Most people don't hate. And so we need to make sure that we've created the right mechanisms for people who are not elites and not connected to Yangon or to Naypyidaw, people who are in the countryside. Again, that question, I see something online that's wrong, what do I do? And I think we need to try to find ways to give people the opportunity to participate in that process, and government can play the role as a convener in that regard.
Thanks, John. You touched based on the frameworks, and I would like to actually come back to the point a little bit on especially from the legal frameworks. Myanmar as a emerging, developing country with young democracy, we probably can look at other countries in the region and then look for some of the best practices that they have come across. I'm sure that we're not the only one who have come into when it comes to challenges that we need to face through. So I would like to ask Diana to basically talk a little about the legal framework from your perspective, and also if you can also share like some case studies, some examples that you can share with the audience, that would be great.
Sure, thanks. Most countries in ASEAN and in Southeast Asia have the same basic legal framework, making an exception to freedom of speech in order to protect national security and other issues having to do with national interests. So typically hate speech will fall into this category. Constitutions or other legislation typically gives the parliament or legislative bodies authority to enact laws to do this. So for example, in Malaysia, you have the Sedition Act, which is an exception to the freedom of speech and criminalizes acts that constitute sedition, which is a very broad category that includes threats to the government, but also actions that are targeted to incite ill will or hostility among classes or religious groups. You have a law with similar effect in Vietnam, Article 258, which criminalizes what are called abuses of freedom of speech. Singapore is an example of a country that has a more targeted law. They enacted the Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act, which allows the Minister of Home Affairs to take action against people who attempt to incite feelings of enmity or hatred between religious groups. And in general, this legislation hasn't targeted the internet specifically. It views hate speech as something that can happen online or offline. The exception to that would be Cambodia, which is currently drafting a cyber law, which would criminalize, among other things, hate speech that is committed online. But again, that's still in the drafting phase. So what these frameworks tend to have in common, with the exception of Singapore and the Cambodian law, if it is carried out, is that they're very general. And really the effectiveness of these laws depends on the rules and regulations that are developed following the passage of the law and the effective implementation of that, which relies on legislators, relies on law enforcement, and also groups like civil society and the media to give their input as these things are developed. And just to echo what everyone else has said, I think so far, is that the community is really important in developing these, because ultimately it's civil society that's going to enforce these by holding members of communities accountable. I think that's especially significant in Myanmar, where people still live, for the most part, in small, tight-knit communities. So really civil society involvement in the drafting of these rules and regulations, and then just being aware of these laws as they're passed is really important.
Thank you, Diana. So we pretty much touched on some of the legal frameworks, community, and also some of the best practices. Yes. Yeah. So actually, yeah. So I would like to actually get the perspective from our the ministry as well. So from the legal framework in the context of Myanmar, if you can add anything, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much, and first of all for inviting me at the last minute to the panel. But it's also my pleasure to share with you on the perspective of the government. As our union minister expressed during the opening, that the issue of social media and troubles on the social media is not unique only for Myanmar. And I'm also working with the ATRC in ASEAN, and we are talking about how we can work together with the global social media providers in tackling these issues. And in terms of Myanmar, recently we have developed this telecom law, which broadly defines and the terms that the ministry and the union government needs to protect our citizens and our nations against these different ranges of acts which will harm the peaceful, the stability, and protect against crime against humanity, basically. And apart from that, also we are working with the ITU and World Bank on developing a framework on cyber crimes legislations. We are working on that, and most of all, after we have passed the telecom law, we are also working together with the European Union and other related agencies in developing proper mechanisms on the legal enforcement powers on internet as well as on the telecommunications. And again, looking at the perspective, there are two things that we as a government can do. And I also support the views from our various speakers that as a government, we should be government should also be someone who arrange, the initiatives to come together. So first of all, it's also important to putting up a legislation and the legal frameworks which work internationally as the best practices, but also we need to have local flavors. It needs to be something that will work in Myanmar, and I'm very glad to see that we are having a community program, because it's not something that the government want to develop and put it on the social community that Myanmar netizens to follow. It should be the other way around, that the Myanmar netizens and the community in the whole work together with all the international social media providers and come up with a framework that will work in Myanmar. And the second thing, very important thing, is awareness raising. Because when we talk about the social media, as my minister in the beginning talked about this, we have less than 5% mark on internet penetrations, but over 2 million Facebook users in Myanmar. So it means that even at this low level of internet penetrations, there are a lot of Facebook users. And we are not talking about Gmail. Usually we talk about Gmail as government mail. It's not Google Mail, right? Even government officials, myself, use Gmails a lot. And there are different things, technical methods, like I have to protect myself from harms through this Gmail usage, harms from using Facebook. So it needs people education. Putting up legal framework is one thing, but also putting up awareness campaigns from social media groups on how to help ourselves to protect ourselves. It's very, very important things. Some of these things that turns out to be harms against humanity are intentional, but some are not intentional. So we need to educate our people. What is harm? What is the harm that will come when you say something? It's different from speaking face to face at the tea shop. So when you speak something on Facebook, it spreads like fire. Sometimes they need to be aware of that. And I believe that these international partners will bring this kind of awareness to our people. And I also support the idea that we need to carry on such campaigns as much as possible. And also on behalf of the government and the ministry, this is a community-led. The government is not leading this. So we want to work together. We are part of the community as a Myanmar citizen. So we want to come up with a good framework and good awareness campaign that will work in Myanmar. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your notes. You actually mentioned, touched on very good point about the 2 million Facebook users. And with that, we do definitely have challenges. For example, His Excellency also mentioned about, security. You mentioned about security, cyberbullying, different damages to other people through hate speech and things like that. And they are, if you go on Facebook and other social media outlets, we definitely can see that is really spreading to the Myanmar social networks as well. So, do you have any suggestions or ideas how to promote the awareness and education that you talked about?
Again, thank you. This is the first step. Now we are working on developing steps, and again, we have our friends and colleagues in MCF, and MCF is an organization, as a community organization that reach across to the country, and after this international seminar or forum, the second step is we can also have similar seminars or initiatives that is taken in every townships, every places in Myanmar. So this is the first step. But the first thing that is important, for example, in some countries like Malaysia, you touch specifically on Malaysia, MCMC. MCMC also develops. It's a regulator. They're not only organizations that are enforcing regulations on the people. They're also responsible for developing educations. So they work together with Google, they work together with the Facebook and other social medias in developing proper, educational materials. And I think this is something that we, as a regulator and the ministry, work together with these international partners. If you go to the website, MCMC, then you will see a lot of educational materials. And unfortunately, as a young and a very young regulator, which is tackling a lot of issues in developing telecom sector, I'm very sorry that we are not at this stage to develop these materials. And I would welcome the idea of working together with Facebook, with Google, and with other international organizations, foundations, to develop this, educational materials. Then it will be easier as a regulator to talk to our public. But again, I reiterate that it should be a community-led program, because whatever we are doing is building trusts, and we also would like to have trust from our community. Only when there is trust that this initiative will work. If people do not trust this initiative, then we will not be able to dissipate the information that we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we were talking about the community, but community is made up of with individuals, like me, like you, like everybody. So, and also social media is really getting into the mainstream in Myanmar context, especially through the mobility. So, I would like to ask Alex from Google about what best practices should we talk about to promote